Money, Drugs, and the Prison System.
My name is Rebecca Grote.
My name is Allie Walls.
My name is Megan Zimmerman.
I'm Tom Paulette.
I'm Quincy DiLoretto.
The problem that we decided to address is a mix of two issues within the criminal justice system. The first problem that we addressed was the war on drugs, which leads to an increase of incarceration rates. In turn, this becomes a problem for the prison system due to the already overcrowded nature and racial disparity that occurs. Next slide.
As you'll see, the war on drugs is a significant contributor for incarcerations in the U.S. The war on drugs is also associated with significant racial disparities in arrests. The figure on the right-hand side shows the arrest rates, black arrest rates versus white arrest rates. And as you can see, the black arrest rates are about 4 times higher than the white arrest rates. The war on drugs is defined as the criminalization of controlled substances. This is that graphic that was just presented in the last slide, shown over a span of several years. And as you can see, that trend has held about constant over between 2001 and 2010. As was mentioned, the war on drugs poses a significant burden on prison systems. About 52% of all arrests are drug-related. Marijuana also is a significant contributor for the drug-related arrests. About 46% of all drug arrests are marijuana possession arrests. And so that accounts for about 25% of all arrests in the US being due to marijuana possession. The war on drugs also is a significant financial burden on US taxpayers. About $47 billion per year was spent enforcing drug laws. So the figure on the right-hand side here shows the annual expenditure in billions of some key government infrastructure. And as you can see, the war on drugs, the expenditure on the war on drugs is about the same as the budget of the Department of Homeland Security, and a little more than NASA's annual budget. The war on drugs is exacerbated by marijuana enforcement policies. So marijuana enforcement accounted for about 3.6 billion across all the states in the US. So for reference, you can see the graphic on the right shows the money spent on marijuana enforcement as compared to the National Science Foundation and NASA's budget. So it's about 18% of NASA's budget. The equivalent of that is spent enforcing marijuana laws. And the NSF, National Science Foundation, funds a lot of science research projects, such as clinical research and inventing the internet. So really what one might think this boils down to is comparing clinical research expenditure versus drug enforcement expenditure. So the taxpayers really have to evaluate that in electing their officials.
And so one of the solutions that is already in existence is legalizing marijuana. And with that, in theory, since we just learned, it should reduce the amount of drug charges because marijuana makes up the majority of drug charges. And this should reduce the amount of overcrowding within the prison system. And on top of that, it would let people be able to use marijuana without the fear of them being arrested. And now where the solution falls short is that 11 states currently have legalized marijuana, which isn't that many compared to the United States, the rest of the states here. And there hasn't been a huge dent into the arrest rates because of this. Also, marijuana is a highly taxed substance, which can cause people to not want to buy it legally and rather go to street dealers and buy it at a street price, which tends to be lower. Next slide. The other solution that is in existence right now is education of prisoners. And this solution was created by government initiatives that give prisoners the ability to further their education. by giving them access to classes and GED exam. The prisons are by law required to give these opportunities to the inmates. It has been shown to greatly reduce recidivism. However, this doesn't mean that it is a working system. According to the Vera Institute of Justice, 35% of state prisons provide college-level courses, and these programs only serve 6% of incarcerated individuals nationwide. This shows that inmates are not utilizing the opportunities of the education, or they're not aware that that is an option to them. Next slide. So our solution that we have been looking at is intermittent sentencing, which is a form of sentencing that allows those who commit nonviolent crimes to be able to stay at home during the weekdays, but they must be home by a certain time. During the weekends, however, they must stay in a holding cell, and this is for the duration of the weekend. In order for a person to receive this sentencing structure, they must get it approved by a judge along with paying fees. This form of sentencing has been seen in Europe and Canada since 2015. They have seen cases in the United States, specifically in Delaware and Virginia. Now, what we are proposing is a change to the current system that is in place. For starters, we are implementing a minimum of 6 months sentence to a maximum of 5 years sentence, so that anyone who falls outside of those parameters will not be able to get the structure. We're also giving it to newly charged people or people who are currently serving a charge. And they're also required to pass all their drug and alcohol tests. This is because it's a way to know that they're benefiting from the sentencing structure, as well as getting the help that they need. With that being said, failure of a drug test will result in removal from the program, and they must do their time in the traditional way. Once in the program, they will be also required to complete one educational course per year that they're sentenced. So that means if they're serving 3 years, they must complete at least 3 courses. Those courses could be anything that work toward a GED or even college level courses. Anyone found guilty of any DUI type charges will also be required to retake driver's education. Next slide.
Nonviolent criminals that have to spend time in jail will have the opportunity to serve their time on the weekends. How that will work is that the inmates will be able to live their normal lives during the week, but will have to report back to jail on the weekends between 5 p.m. on Friday and released at 5 p.m. on Sunday for 72-hour holding period. In order to take advantage of this opportunity, inmates will have to obtain approval from a judge. After being approved, inmates will be offered numerous opportunities such like rehab, job training, counseling, and therapy while they serve their sentencing. Next slide, please.
This particular program allows people the chance to have a different kind of rehab. This rehab allows for a person to come clean while still living their normal life. It allows them to still live with their families, keeping the family unit connected, as well as continuing to work if they need to. This also allows them the chance to improve their education with one course every year they're sentenced. We know that education reduces the rate of recidivism, which should help with reducing overcrowding in the prison system. These courses can go towards a person's GED or college credit. This would even allow for a person to complete workforce courses, which would allow them to increase their understanding of the workforce in general and improve their financial standing and their opportunities to increase career options. There's also a lot of psychological benefits to intermittent sentencing. This allows a person to break normal drug habits by living their normal lives with the accountability of the drug and alcohol tests. Our brain generally responds to environmental cues that have been conditioned to indicate that certain events are occurring in a person's life. This allows the person to prepare for what's going on. And in the case of a person using substances, particular things such as a room or an area that they normally use a drug in, or certain objects associated with drug use, can be triggers for needing the drug. While living in a normal prison in serving traditional sentencing would not allow them to face these cues and learn to it would not allow them to face these cues and learn to overcome them without the enforcement of the drug. This should theoretically reduce the use and allow them to break these habits. Further, the intermittent sentencing program would save money. The inmates would be spending less time in prisons, which would drop the cost of running the prison in general, as they don't have to provide space and meals for every single prisoner every day of the week. Further, this program is meant to reduce recidivism, which should drop the number of people returning, which would overall decrease the amount of charges being made, which should be saving the government about $1.2 billion a year. Next slide.
How we will pay for this is that the inmates will have to pay $50 to apply for the program, and once they get accepted by the judge, they will have to pay $50 more to be able to enter in the program. Each week, the inmates will have to take a drug test, and the drug test will average around $4 per time. They will need to take that every single time they enter into the jails. During the week, the jail system will also save money on spending on food during the week, and will use that money for food on the weekends. Next slide, please.
There may be some limitations or problems with introducing this program. The general public may not approve of this. However, we have plans to properly inform the public and reinforce that the intermittent sentencing program is strictly for those sentenced to non-violent crimes. There is the chance that a person may not show up to their 72-hour hold. For this, there are punishments for not showing up. If they completely abandon the 72-hour hold, they will be removed from the program and they will serve their time traditionally. If they are late, not showing up to the 5 p.m. mark, there is additional time added to the 72-hour hold with a 20-minute grace period. Another issue could be making room for those in the prison system. We are suggesting that there's specific cells that are for the 72-hour hold, as well as the possibility of alternating days for the hold rather than strictly weekends. They could explore options for serving that time consecutively throughout the week. We would also reduce the amount of cells needed by creating cell mates for the 72-hour hold. Next. Thank you very much for listening to our presentation. We believe that overall, this program will reduce the prison population, it will reduce recidivism rates, save money, and improve the lives of those living in the prison system. Thank you.